Location.
Be at ease, I'm not going to preach. Let us bow in a moment of prayer. Our Father, we are grateful this day for your blessings. We invoke your blessings upon each individual that is here. We're grateful that we live in a country that we can have gatherings such as this. We pray that you would grant wisdom and knowledge to each of our lives, that what we do will be to further your kingdom and help your people as we journey through life. Thank you for this day and for the blessings that you have sent our way. We'll praise your wonderful name because we ask it in Jesus' lovely name. Amen.
At this time, if everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Everyone will just continue enjoying your meal. I'd like to welcome you to the first quarter membership meeting, Chamber of Commerce for 1995. I'd like to thank the Education Committee, who is our sponsor today, for all their work and bringing us what I think will be a very good meeting today. Start things out, I think we'll have a drawing. Maybe we can get a prize out to somebody. Everybody came to win something. Well, I'll just go ahead and everybody wants to grab their ticket. The first item we're going to give away is a silver dollar. That's compliments of Citizens Bank. And I am mixing them up, and I don't have one in here, so. Okay. 88 2940. Representative Lee.
No, you can't have it. Expect a lot out of it. That's a dollar.
Kayleen, where's the prize?
Is it up here? Carlisle.
Robert got one.
Come here.
At this time, I'd like to introduce the chairman of the Education Committee, Mr. Keith Baldridge.
I'm so glad all of you could come out today. This good turnout shows me that there are a lot of people that are interested in education in Okmulgee City and Okmulgee County. I want to tell you what this is about. At the first part of last year, when I took the chair of this committee, Bill Middleton, who is a school board member here in Okmulgee, gave me a letter or a focus from Sandy Garrett's office, and it was concerning character education, values education, or ethical education, whatever you'd like to call it. And it just seemed like it was an appropriate time to look into this. So I brought it to the committee and asked if there was interest in this, and there was. So we decided to pursue it. And we've been working on it now for about 8 months. The references that Ms. Garrett's focus had on it were Putnam City, Oklahoma, Wake County, North Carolina, and McAllister, Oklahoma. And I personally called the superintendents of all 3 of these school districts and visited with them to find out a little bit about how they had done things in their area. All of them had launched a task force within their community made up of educators, ministers, professional people, teachers, parents, civic leaders, all respectable people. And they decided which values that they would like for their children to learn while they were in school. And then they went before the school boards, and the school board accepted them as part of their curriculum, and now these schools are teaching them along with their regular curriculum in every class that they have. And it's up to each individual school district to decide what value characteristics they want to have. For example, citizenship might be a very important one to us. Or I've heard respect is one that we would like to see more from our children in our community. But that would be up to the task force, and it is not a quick deal, I found out. This will take some time. In fact, it will take some time just sometimes to agree upon those character values that you would like to have. But there's still a lot of good news in Okmulgee. We have a lot of good things happening in education here. I think we have excellent curriculum choices in our schools. We have good buildings. Some of them are new and some of them are renovated. We have one of my favorites, the Education Committee. We have parented out of the Education Committee, the Education Foundation, Okmulgee Public School Foundation, which on its initial fundraising dinner raised $50,000. And we have given away $5,500 of that to classroom teachers already. And today, in fact, is the deadline for applications. And in the next semester, there will be given another $2,500, $3,000 to teachers to use to educate our children. And some of the things that they did with the rainforest at second grade at Westside. We've given away math computers, math geos, science computers, and we have a lot of other things that are upcoming. One of the things that I think is a real plus for us, and I've believed this for a long time, is that we have some excellent faculty and administrators. Typical of that is Miss Marilyn Jackson, right here, who last year won the Class Act Award for Channel 6, and that award came with a $1,000 cash prize to her. This year, if you don't know, I'm sure most of you do, let me make sure I get this right. She won the Reader's Digest American Heroes in Education Award. There were 656 candidates across America, and only 10 were chosen. That netted for Banneker School a $10,000 cash prize, and for her a $5,000 cash prize. And of course, I think we'd be falling short if we didn't mention her principal, who put her in for these awards, Miss Linda Moore, who's an excellent educator. We also have some other programs that I think show that this community is interested in education. One that is one of my personal favorites is the Ministerial Alliance Manna Day program, in which we provide almost 50% of our school population with everything that they need for the first day of school, including a haircut. And I know the principals are almost always all there, and they really appreciate that effort on your part, the community's part, to do that. Couldn't be done without your help. And then, of course, we have a brand new Votech, right, I believe, in that direction. If you haven't seen this facility, it is beautiful. It is really something that we can be proud of. And of course, here at OSU Okmulgee, I know this is a minister's nightmare, is that they have a building project here every time you turn around. They're expanding, and I know that since my dad over there isn't really wild about all those building projects as a pastor because it's such a headache. But we have a lot to be proud of here in Okmulgee, and we're going to continue on. What we have in mind is introducing this ethics education or values education to the school board. They are all out of town. Bill was here. I think he's probably already left to catch his plane. They're going to San Francisco to the National School Board meeting, but we are videotaping this because the school board members did request that we do this for them so they could see it. There is a great deal of interest in this at this time right now, so please give us your support.
This time we're going to have some more drawings, win some more prizes. Okay. What we got here? Got a Fun Run t-shirt. Well, this one I guess is the open house t-shirt. OSU Okmulgee. Open house t-shirt, compliments of OSU Okmulgee and the Membership Services Committee. $88.28.85. The man on the camera.
Jerry, you had both heads.
She got it as a judge.
Now for our watering hole, which is worth $20. That's all. Dig deep here. Oh, wait. Barry Ruth. I don't think I saw Barry here. Okay, so no winner this time. At this time, I'd like to ask Keith to come back up to the microphone and introduce our special guest.
I have one other comment that I'd like to make before I introduce Sandy. I thought for a long time what I would say today. I knew that, and didn't know how much time I would have exactly. And a lot of our plans were changed this week by the tragedy that our communities had to face. I went by First Baptist Church at 11 o'clock this morning to pay my respects to Makuta Wilson, and in fact have his obituary here and wrote my notes on the back of it. I think that this just accentuates the need that we have in this day and this time for values education. Please join with me in welcoming Ms. Sandy Garrett, our State Superintendent of Education.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to get to the microphone in a minute, but I want to, I brought some I think, certainly fresh news to you about your school district report card, and I want to give that to you in a minute also. But I do want to, at first, as we begin, I want to stay on camera because I want the board members to see me. They look at this tape, and I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate the kind invitation from Todd Klobanish. I appreciate also so very much the leadership that Keith Baldridge has taken with continuing our character education initiative in the state of Oklahoma. As he said, you may call it values education, you may call it ethical education, you may call it character education, but it is something that cannot, and we do appreciate Representative Lease, but we don't want this legislated, because this has to happen with the spirit of a local community developing and coming together the beliefs that this community wants instilled in their young people as they graduate from Okmulgee High School. You indeed have a wonderful school system with wonderful resources, and I want to recognize, I see in the audience today Dr. Bob Klobanish, the president here at OSU Tech. He does an outstanding job, provides outstanding leadership for this community and for the boys and girls of greater Oklahoma, actually. And I also see Jerry Painter come in, who has led the wonderful initiative of the new VOTEC, Green Country VOTEC. And I don't know if all of you know this, but the state superintendent is honored to serve as the chair of the state VOTEC system. And it is an honor because we in Oklahoma have the absolute greatest VOTEC system in the nation. And I wish all of our congressmen just understood when they're up there slashing this week and last week some of the VOTEC programs, because Oklahoma is different. Our people have really instilled and built an educational legacy of resources. Now it's our job in each community to actually utilize those resources to their maximum and not shut anything off in the afternoon at 3:30, or certainly not deny those adults that might want to come in the evening and use the computer labs, etc., their opportunity. But as I said, I do appreciate the opportunity to be here because these are the kinds of audiences that I think can get the ball rolling with people like Keith pushing you a little bit on this, to character education become a morality in the Okmulgee public schools. I mentioned Representative Least, and I didn't know you could, he wins these door prizes and all this. I'm telling you. Well, he works real hard at the Capitol too, and very much committed to education, and I truly mean that. This state has done a very good job of investing in the academic structure of education. The local community has opportunities to build the buildings and now come around that school and say, we want to do more. We have been successful in our academic pursuits, and if we have time at the end of the session, I will show you a little bit of that. But I do want to start off by giving each of you a copy of Okmulgee's report card. And when I say report card, one of the things that we did with the Education Reform and Funding Act in 1990 is say that we wanted an Office of Accountability. And what that Office of Accountability would do would be to issue reports to the public, to every citizen that wanted to obtain a copy, and certainly to our educators in this state who needed to look at their school in perspective to similar schools, similar populations, and also to compare them with state and local averages. We have done that. We have tried to do that in a user-friendly way. You know, I find that working in government is very challenging and interesting, but it is very hard sometimes to break old habits. And I can tell you that's not just at the state and local level, that's also at the federal level, because I had a long conversation yesterday with some federal so-called bureaucrats in trying to let them understand the real world and the real world of interpreting data. What had happened in the past, education had been accountable, but they had done that in volumes and volumes of statistics that literally no one ever read. So when we came in, we said we want it to look like the world's most popular newspaper. And I don't see Jerry Shin here today, but I'm sorry to tell you it's not the Okmulgee Times. It is USA Today. Some time back, I'll bet a lot of you probably wondered if that newspaper would ever survive. The only time I usually ever saw it was when I got on a plane. I would always put a quarter in, or 50 cents, whatever it is, I think it's 50 cents now, and say, and buy USA Today and read it. And I thought, well, this thing will never survive, a national newspaper with current data every day. How many of you thought that? I bet a lot of you did. I did. I thought, gee, they've taken a real chance, Gannett Company, in doing this. Well, of course, the moral to that story is technology has changed the world. Literally, it has changed the world. Some of the things I'm going to talk about with our children's lives are going to talk about technology, but what we have is the world's most popular newspaper now, and most lucrative and profitable newspaper is USA Today. It's USA Today. And the reason, think a minute, because we're all busy people. And we read in sound bites. I call them read bites. We read in charts and graphs and read bites. And where do we get most of our news? Television. Sorry. I know we have some nice reporters here today, and I will tell you, I work a lot with the editors because this is this initiative, and I'm glad they're here today because this initiative is something that I hope that our newspapers in Oklahoma, and we have a wonderful group of local newspapers in Oklahoma, I hope they look at this. But as they also look at my chart I'm going to show you, I can tell you this did not happen overnight. In fact, it's not even as good as I want it to be, in the fact that the average public does not have time to weed through a statistical operation. And unfortunately, when I meet with these editors, they say, well, we know what's happening to the sales of our local newspapers. Kids can't read anymore. You know that's not the answer. You know what the answer is? It lies, in my opinion, with the USA Today solution, in the fact that formats of old newspaper agendas need to be changed. They've got to be changed a little bit. People don't have time, unfortunately, to do what my father did and sit in his easy chair and read 4 newspapers a day. They do have time and they want to know about local and community news, school news, sports news, and everything else that's happening in our world today. So newspaper industry must change just like the rest of us, in the fact that our lives are not going to be like they were in the 50s and 60s. And sometimes when I talk about character education, people say, let's just go back to the 50s and 60s. I would like to do that, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But unfortunately, this world is sailing past the 21st century pretty soon. And technology and other opportunities and challenges in our society make it not possible to ever stop and roll the clock back in time. So we must adapt creative, good, solid solutions for our children today and our citizens today. And one of those things, I think, is being accountable. So I'm going to show you with this overhead projector, and I know that you all can't see it, so you'll have a handout. We're going to start out with that, and then we'll come back to the character education area. I used to be a teacher, can't you? For 15 years I was a teacher in Muskogee, Oklahoma. And actually, though, even though I can say that I'm an Okie from Muskogee because I was born there, and I truly was born there because the hometown that I grew up in was Stillwell, Oklahoma, home of Jerry Painter. And he also was raised in Stillwell, went to high school with me, or I went to high school with him. And we didn't have a hospital in Stillwell. So I went to Muskogee and I was born there, and then later in life I became a teacher there, teaching first grade for 13 years and then moving on to middle school and high school. What we have in Okmulgee, and some of the news is good and some of the news is not so good. But what I want you to have an opportunity to do is to see firsthand your school's report card and what we will be sending. In fact, it's already in the mail and they may be already in possession of it. Every newspaper in Oklahoma, every superintendent and board member in Oklahoma will have Okmulgee's report card. It's very important. Let's look at this and look at what your targets are and your challenges for the future. Now, I'm not going to go in detail to this. This is kind of an aside that I brought you today. But obviously what we want to do, and I spend a lot of my time speaking with businesses around the nation and trying to urge them to come to Oklahoma, and you know what they're interested in. I'm sorry for the chamber members to tell you this, but they've never asked me about right to work. They have always asked me, and they've asked every governor since Henry Bellman, about education. What opportunities you have for education in your state and your community, how the schools are doing, what the commitment in the legislature is to legislation, to education support, and what percentage of our state budget is going to education, and what's happening in our schools. That's what they want to know. And indeed, they can look here. You see the enrollment as compared to the state enrollment. You see the attendance rate. You see the dropout rate, and you can see that Muskogee's or Okmulgee's dropout rate is low. It's 1.7 compared to the state 3.6. So you have a very low dropout rate. Your ACT is not as high as the state average. You'll see it's 19.3 compared to 20.3. one of the aspects there that you might want to think about is this, is that you test, and the state tests, 68% of their seniors for the ACT. You know how many enter college? And ACT is an entrance test? Only 40%. You know how many graduate from college? Only 20%. Think about that a minute. Where are those other 80% going? They're going to the world of work. They're going to the world of work with skills or without skills. And of course, this is why education is so important. Now, I'm not going to go into other particulars of this, but I wanted you to kind of see this. Last year, I really liked our report card better because this was in a circled graph. But what we have this year is a lot more information on one page that can still be, I think, read in a sound bite or a read bite and very important to citizens. So that's something just for your own information today. And to let you know that I'm very proud. When I go to the Chief State School Officers meeting, and that's my counterparts in other states, I did that, in fact, 2 weeks ago to meet in Washington with the federal legislators and my counterparts. We are the only one of 3 states in the nation, 3 states in the nation that have outlined a core basic skill curriculum and testing to match that curriculum. We're only one of 3 states, so we're going to be able to give you even better information in the future. This is the first year of our assessment to our core curriculum. And it's reading and writing and math and science and geography and history, all of those core academic areas. We're going to be able to tell you how exactly we're doing in tune to that. But you know, this gets me into really why I'm here today. And that's the fact that even though Oklahoma has invested dollars and planning into the academic security of our children, it finally dawned on me a couple of years ago that, you know, we can do all of this, and we want to do all of this, and we need to do all of this for our children. But if we are graduating highly educated but morally illiterate students, what gains have we made? What gains have we made? Now, a lot of people say, well, you study reading, writing, arithmetic in schools and you'll automatically get good character. Unfortunately, that, ladies and gentlemen, is simply not the truth. I was devastated this week to read in the newspaper about one of your city's brightest and most popular high school seniors, Nkudu Wilson, and that he had been murdered by gang members in Wichita while visiting Wichita State University because Nkudu didn't have on the right clothes in the right colors. You know, I don't need to say much else, do I? Because I can pull out any newspaper. I can pull out the news last night in Oklahoma City, which had 3 groups of parents brought into jail for abusing their young baby and killing, in 2 instances, 2 out of 3, their young babies under the age of 2. Literally abusing the children, beating them to death. One was from McAllister. You've heard it too. Before I went to deliver a character education speech to the National North Central Accreditation Group in Chicago on Monday, and they were quite shocked to have this on their agenda, by the way, which surprised me. But anyway, when I delivered that, I took with me a news clip from Sand Springs, where a kindergartner took to school last Friday a loaded .22 caliber pistol in his backpack for show and tell. Now, I don't think any of these moms and dads out there see them coming home from school with guns that they picked up on the school bus or in the school classrooms. They're getting these guns from home. That's where they're getting them. And they're bringing them to school. And many times they end up using guns. Why does that happen? You know, why do we need to think about today in 1995 character education? Isn't that the home's responsibility? Yes, it is the home's responsibility. And I know that we have many very good parents that do instill the values and virtues that we're all talking about here today in their children. Certainly, I don't think there's any parent that really doesn't want that to happen. But yet, we look at why we need to do this in the schools. I'll tell you why. We have some statistics in Oklahoma, and I'm not going to bore you with a lot of statistics today, but I do want to, because you all know the story, but I do want to tell you a few. Oklahoma is near the top in teenage pregnancy. Children raising children. Children never learning to be parents, never really learning to be adults, and yet having 2 or 3 children to raise. Crime, violence, drugs, divorce. Oklahoma is number 2 in the nation in divorce. We have been there for a long time. Used to be, I would give that in my speech and I'd say Nevada's number 1, Oklahoma's number 2 in the number of divorces that we have per capita in our state. This year it changed. Oklahoma's still number 2, but Arkansas is number 1. Now why is that? Arkansas and Oklahoma, I thought they were right in the middle of the Bible Belt. The fact of the matter is this. Many of those issues we can't repair. We can't do it all in the schools of our state, in the schools of our nation. But we can instill characteristics of good citizenship and of a quality life that hopefully will prevent and to cause people to think about what they're doing in their life and their daily living. So we continue on. When we talk about values and virtues, let's talk about just exactly what we're talking about, because all of you know that the kids today are different than the kids that I taught in my first grade classroom in the 80s and 70s in Muskogee. How are they different? Well, first of all, their ears have been filled with violent rap music. Their ears have been filled with television shows that show literally everything, with 100 channels available to each of them, and a latchkey situation where they spend many, many hours at home. Let's talk about one more thing before I show you the characteristics that we're talking about and the virtues and values, and that is the fact that ETS is a very prestigious testing company, and they're located back east somewhere, and when they speak, educators usually listen because they don't speak frivolously and they don't speak often on their research. But recently they gave 5 characteristics of successful students. They said, you know, we have looked at all the successful students and that have become successful in life, in business, or successful graduates of colleges or universities, and here's what we find. We find that number 1, it is connected to the number of hours, it's conversely connected to the number of hours they spend in front of the TV. The average Oklahoma child, by the way, spends 6 hours a day in front of the television. The same amount that they spend in front of their teachers a day. The next thing they found, it's very directly linked to the quality and quantity of reading material in the home. Reading material in the home. Children simply don't have good quality reading material often anymore in the home. As I said, I remember growing up, my father read, I know not everybody's father did this, but mine read 4 newspapers a day. And we had books. And at night, I remember Mom and Dad reading books. That's not happening today. Many of our children just simply do not have access to quality reading material in the home. The next one, the numbers of days absent from school. That's number 3. Hours of TV and the quality and quantity of reading material and the days absent. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? If you're not there, you can't learn. And the next one, let's see if I can remember all 5 of these. The next one is the presence of 2 parents in the home. That statistic we've already talked about. Many of our children are raised, and some quite successfully, with single parents, whether it be moms or dads. And certainly many of them are not raised with both birth parents in today's world. The last one is the number of hours spent in the home doing homework. And that's another one of my initiatives, is to encourage teachers to assign homework and to encourage teachers at the beginning of the school year is to say, parents, here are your rights, but here are your responsibilities, and that is to help enforce that homework situation in the home. Now, why doesn't that happen? Those five things seem to all come from the home. Why doesn't that happen? Because we have a changed world, as I mentioned to you again. We have a very young state, we have a populous state, we have lots of education resources, we have people, I think, committed to education, but our lifestyles have changed. Let's think about that a minute too. What has changed in our life? And some of you may have heard me say this before. We were born in 1907, Oklahoma was, and I grew up in about the 50s, and I suspect some of you in this audience did that too. And I remember my growing up in Stillwell, Oklahoma, and it was a wonderful childhood. I couldn't have asked for a better childhood. We weren't rich and we weren't poor, and none of us knew the difference, and I rode a school bus every day. And I had a mother that stayed home and wore one of those things called an apron. You remember those? And my father drove a black Chevrolet and wore a felt hat and went to work every day. I lived in a little white house, and it really had a little white picket fence. And I had Sally, Dick, and Jane. Dick and Sally were my brother and sister. And I was Jane. And we had Puff and Spot. And that's the way it was. That's the way it was until 1955. What happened in my house in 1955? Television. That's what happened. I'm going to tell you that story because I think all of you can relate to that story. And what happened in my house in 1955 was not different than happened in nearly every house in 1955. I was home one day after school. My mother really served milk and cookies. And we were there in the living room, and the phone rang, and she picked it up. It was one of those phones with 2 pieces, and she says, you know, hello, and I could hear the person on the other line. It was my father, and he said, Katie, I'm bringing home a television. And of course, we all jumped up and down. We had never seen a television in anybody's home, never. The only place I'd seen those is when I went on Saturday morning. My mom would give me a dime to go, Jerry, to the Eagle Theater and see the matinee. And if I got there early, I'd take the time to walk up Main Street, press my nose against the glass, and look at those 10 magic boxes in Otto Alderson's window, his storefront window in the appliance store there in Stillwell. And there they were because they were all on. They were all turned on Saturday morning. And I would watch them. And I would wonder if these were for real and if we'd ever see one in anybody's house. And sure enough, one was coming to my house that day. And so my brother and sister and I, Sally, Dick, and Jane, ran out to the end of the driveway. We called it the end of the lane. We ran out there to wait for Otto Alderson's pickup truck to deliver our TV. Pretty soon here he came. He had this big crate in the back, and we knew what it was. We followed him around to the back of my house. He came in. In the meantime, my mother had been in there. She had the Electrolux out, and she was vacuuming the corner of the living room that was going to be reserved for this monument. Here he came in with this big crate. He unloaded it. It was a Zenith. Remember that? He put it into that corner, and he tinkered around with those big tubes and things in the back of that television, and he plugged it in, and he went, no, before he plugged it in, he went on the front porch, and he got his ladder out, and he went on top of our roof. And he put on this very ornate, elaborate antenna. And we stood back and we looked at it. We thought our house was ready for outer space or something. And we went back in and he said, stand back, I'm going to plug it in and turn it on. And we stood back. In fact, we sat for 2.5 hours with our legs crossed in the middle of the living room floor watching the test pattern. Remember the test pattern? You remember it well, don't you? I remember it. And then sometimes in Stillwell we had this program called Snow. You know, we would go home and we would think we were going to see Ozzie and Harriet or I Love Lucy or the Head Parade or Ted McAnna Amateur Hour, and some days we'd just see snow. But sometimes it would tease us and come in and then go away. Those were the good old days, weren't they? You know, Otto Alderson that day when he left, he forgot to tell us that caution, this may be harmful to your health, and that there's a selector dial, and there's an on and off knob that's very important. Because while television has been truly amazing and done very many wonderful things for all of us, taken us to places we'll never be, allowing us to see firsthand news that we could never see, some we will never want to see. It has also been a deterrent to many things that happened to me before 1955, because the next invention that came into our house was the TV tray. The TV tray came into our house next. After that day, just to tell you very simply, dinner conversations went unsaid. Many bedtime stories went unread, because the TV became the center point of our family living and life. And I grant you that there are not many houses in Okmulgee, rich, poor, or otherwise, that don't have televisions. How many are lingering to the set to see one of our famous football heroes as he is tried for the murder of his wife or ex-wife and a harmless bystander? How many people are doing that every day? I suspect a lot of people are doing that every day. What else are kids doing? We've gone from Leave It to Beaver to Leave It to Beavis. And unfortunately, while the Cleaver family reflected a lot of the values in our days but didn't look like all of our families, Beavis, unfortunately, also reflects a lot of the darker things that are going on in this country today. Now, this is why we must add the glue to our academic reforms in Oklahoma. We can be the first state in the nation to do this, I grant you. We're the first state in the nation to talk about character education out loud, because when you say values, people say, oh no, we don't want values. We're not talking about any soft, warm, fuzzy, feel-good, anything. We're talking about major, important, traditional, American values that every religion, that every American can agree on. Now we'll talk about what they are and what we're talking about here. I call them virtues many times just to get them unconfused with the idea that we're trying to teach some sort of value that some of us may or may not agree with. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about common sense values and virtues. We're talking about respect. Respect for self. respect for others, respect for the flag, respect for our country. We know the opposite of respect, and what it is, it's contempt for the rights and property of others and disrespectful behaviors. And we all know we see too much of that today. You know, when we're thinking about respect here for a minute, a couple of years ago when we started thinking about this, and when I said, you know, the violence, safety, a lot of you have studied education in school, and you've heard about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you remember what that basic need is in all of us. It is food, it is safety, and it's shelter. Well, safety is one of those basic needs. If people do not feel safe in our schools, they're not going to send their children there. I wouldn't send mine there. It is scary, and I know you all have had some specific problems here in Okmulgee about that. Well, let's think about it. We had a violence forum. We held it at Oklahoma Christian University. We invited 40 gang members, or former gang members, and I invited clergy, and I invited a few legislators and parents and community members, civic people, and the rule for the adults for the day was to not talk. Boy, that's hard for adults. They couldn't talk, they had to listen. And I asked Jane Giroux to facilitate that day. At the end of that day, we were all just about in tears because we had heard some very, very sad stories from boys and girls, teenagers, who said, we join gangs to have a family. This is our hood, which is short for neighborhood. This is our hood. We belong to them. They look out for us. We look out for them. They also revealed to us that they didn't have respect for other people's property. They really didn't know the difference between right and wrong. That was so shocking to me because I thought everyone knew what was right and what was wrong. And actually, many of these teenagers thought it was acceptable to get in someone else's locker and steal their tennis shoes, their pump-up Reeboks, or their whatever. Because clothing of certain looks and kinds had become cool or in, and it was a big deal. That time we talked about maybe public schools should start wearing uniforms also, just some basic uniforms. We're also talking about work. The value of honest effort expended for honest expectation for just reward. We all know the opposite of that is too common, laziness and the desire to get something for nothing. And why do we think the people of this nation are fed up with welfare? They are. We are. That doesn't mean we want to not help needy people. We do. All of us do. But we all believe in the work ethic. And we are training our children to be active, productive citizens in this state and nation, and we must realize that work is also a trait that we want instilled in our children. Fairness. We're speaking about fairness. We can never assure equality of result, but it is a basic American belief that each of us has a God-given right to a fair and equal chance. Fairness. I'm speaking of self-discipline. The learned ability to pursue all things in moderation, and to restrain those appetites that have the potential to injure all of us. I know that I'm not alone in the belief that far too many people lack the quality of self-discipline these days. That is the one reason, of course, that our prisons, our drug and our alcohol rehab centers are so crowded. And you know, Representative, I have never seen a state get an award for having the best prisons. So investing more in prisons is just saying we've got a big problem. And our problem can be turned around if we join hands around that schoolhouse and say, we're going to talk about some basic virtues in Okmulgee. And we're going to start doing it very early in that child's life. We're not going to wait till they're seniors in high school and say, oh, by the way, you need to have respect for others, you need to work hard, you need to have self-discipline. It's not going to happen if it happens then. So, what do we have We also have thoughtfulness. Thoughtfulness. Boy, doesn't that sound easy. A lot of the schools that are taking this advantage are having kindness weeks or kindness months. And they're saying, you know, we want acts of kindness. Do an act of kindness every day. You know, even something as simple as that catches on. Kids love that. They love it. They'll come to their teachers and say, my act of kindness, I've already done it. It's 8:15. You know, they catch on to that. Thoughtfulness. The very thing that we strive to teach our children, but which sometimes we forget to do. So we've got to be role models for all of these virtues. I'm speaking of courage. The courage to say no to drugs, the courage to say yes to decent and civil behavior. I'm talking about responsibility. The historic and traditional responsibility of our public schools to teach the simple, fundamental, and universal values and virtues necessary for good citizenship. In other words, schools, I think, have the responsibility to teach responsibility. Now, how do we do this? How do we do it? Because it's easy for me to stand up here and tell you these are virtues that I support. You may want to add to that list. You may want to take away from that list. But how and why do we bring that into our school? Obviously, it should and needs to be done in the home. We're not saying it never needs to stop there. It should and needs to be done in the churches. We're not saying it needs to stop there. What we're saying is that America's schools and Oklahoma's schools have a responsibility to help the society survive. It's just a matter of that. We're not competing with Arkansas and Texas anymore. We're a family in this United States of America that are competing with European kids, with Japanese kids, with German kids. This is a shrinking world. When I talked about television, you know what's happened since then. These kids that have been raised with television have also been raised with computers. They're now on internet, talking to people all over the world. They understand technology. I can go into any school in Okmulgee, and the most computer literate people in that school will be the children, the students. And so yes, we've got to understand that what's gone into their minds and their heads are not what went into my mind and my head when I was growing up. We didn't even go into the fact that, you know, on television you can get not only every violent scene you ever dreamed of in your life and then more, but also every sexually explicit scene that you ever dreamed about and never have even thought that would be on television in your living room. All of that is there. And so now how do we teach our children about this and why? Well, I suggest this. I suggest that we not mandate it at the state level, because this has got to be a local issue, and that's why I got in the car today and drove to Okmulgee. If I thought that things could change by a law or by a state board regulation, by golly, we'd be doing it. But I don't think that'll change anything. I think the only way things will change is for every citizen in this community to say, yes, I owe it to the future of our nation, my grandchildren, my neighbors, to leave this world a little bit better than I left it, and to help our schools with the children. I encourage and urge, and a lot of smart administrators are already doing it, to establish a task force or a committee, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. Do it on a Saturday afternoon, or even do it on a Sunday afternoon. Invite clergy by all means, because this is not a religious endeavor, but this is an endeavor supported by every religious group that I've talked with. Maybe not David Koresh, if he were a religious group, I don't know. But we have the responsibility to reach out to our religious organizations, to reach out to our civic group, Lions Club, Chamber, Rotary. We have lots of clubs that are very civic-minded, very service-oriented in this state. Then to parents, educators, all walks of life need to come together, and then they need to have a big debate. And it may take all day, it may take 2 weeks, to decide on what characteristics you want instilled in your graduates here in Okmulgee. You want them to graduate with a good ACT score. You want them to graduate with knowledge of reading, writing, arithmetic. history, etc. But you also want them to be respectful. You want them to value work. You want them to be responsible. You want them to have self-discipline. All of those things are so important. After you agree on these beliefs, then the faculty works with you in saying how we can bring this in, make it alive every day in our halls in Muskogee. And Okmulgee, I'm sorry I keep saying Muskogee, you know why. By saying, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. What's wrong with manners, good manners? Nothing's wrong with good manners. But unless they're cultivated at a very early age, you're not going to have good manners. You know, I have two little nieces. I actually have three nieces. One was raised in Stillwell, and two were raised in southern Georgia. And I always just loved the fact that when they would come home for Christmas, they would say, yes, ma'am, Aunt Sandy. You know, they were raised in that southern tradition of very good manners that some of us have let slide by the wayside here. Not that that's going to make you a smarter person, but it's going to, here again, pull together these values that we all respect. We also can teach it through every single academic course offering, whether it be history, pointing out the courageous acts in history, whether it be kindness, whether it be responsibility. We can also teach it in our economics class. We teach budgeting. You know, a lot of times kids think it's real neat to go out and get a job for $5 an hour, and maybe that's why some of them drop out of school. Actually, if more teaching is done about the real world and real occupations, and I know VoTech does a lot of that, Jerry, kids then will start having goals and dreams and ambitions based on responsibility and thoughtfulness. All of these things, I feel, can be incorporated right into your daily curriculum that we've established statewide in Oklahoma. We're very fortunate that we have so many people interested in education. You know, we've had a graying population for some years in Oklahoma, and that means just simply people that don't have children currently in our schools, but they still care. And I think if you reach out to many of them, they will be mentors. They will help. I also have one last suggestion before we open for questions, and that is this. If you don't have a Boy Scout, a Cub Scout, a Girl Scout, a Brownie, a Campfire Girl, a Rainbow Girl, whatever organization, these children need affiliation. They need to belong. And what I find, Boy Scouts is my particular favorite in the fact that they have really put together some units for learning to live with character. You know, I want to close with the Boy Scout oath. I don't think that any of us can say that there was anything ever that talked about values more than the Boy Scout oath. It says, on my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, and to obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. That's it. And the presidents of this United States, many of them have been Eagle Scouts. Many of the leaders of our CEOs of our biggest companies have been Eagle Scouts. They've gone through that scouting process. And it doesn't have to be Boy Scouts, but it needs to be something. Kids today need that kind of belonging and caring from the adults and their peers. I thank you very much for your kind attention. I wish we had another hour because I have a lot more to say. But I want to close and see if you might have a question or two. Anybody? Yes, sir.
Sandy, I have a question. I heard over the news on Channel 6 this past week in Muskogee that there was a school teacher that was fired because he did a headlock on some student, and the news commentators said, as they were interviewing perhaps maybe some teachers, that they were wanting to implement a self-defense program for the school teachers. Is that true?
I wish I could say yes or no. I don't know that incidents, but I will tell you this. One of the things that we've talked about a lot in our state is discipline. And a lot of you know that I have talked about discipline a lot. One of the things that we have, not just in this state, but in this country, is, you know, we have a lawsuit-happy population. And we have a lot of folks that get very, very proactive if their child is touched, period. And it may have happened. We also have a lot of teachers that I have talked with, not this particular instance, that are afraid. They're afraid to go to school in some instances because they don't know how to maybe shoot a gun or defend themselves. So I don't know about that, but I will tell you this. Safety is a very, very basic need in all of us. And when we feel like we're threatened, probably we're going to ask for some defense. And that's such a horrible statement, but you can pick up the newspaper any day of the week and see this, any day of the week. It is not something isolated. I could, you know, just bring you the newspaper and say, look at these articles. This will tell you why we need to talk about these things. So we must start very early in a child's life, as early as they come to school, that we can make a difference. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Sandy, does this incorporate some of the books that have been introduced to our young people? I mean, some of them that don't follow this agenda. I have a couple in mind, a couple of books now that I worked, and I think I was successful to get out of our Head Start program here. That was just absolutely against this.
You know, when I first took office, I've done a lot of controversial things, but one of the controversial things I did is to say that textbook selection should be a local issue. And the reason I did that, and I got all, Billy Nadd came out after me, but because the state textbook committee does that. But we were successful in getting 5 schools may put a book on the adopted textbook list. But going beyond that, and I think that's what you're referring to, you bet. You should look at every library book you have on your shelf. There's nothing wrong with that. It needs to be done locally. I don't need to send out a list to you. You all need to do that. You need to look at what goes in children's minds, because there are some things that I certainly don't agree with that are there in print, in action. You need to review all of that. You need to review pictures. People today that do that publish books, why do you think they publish books? They publish books for money. Obviously, they do that for money. You know, I also will tell you, Tipper Gore kind of got laughed at a few years ago. That's the vice president's wife, because she said, I think we should have a rating on cassette tapes and records like we do on movies. Well, I agree with her. Have you ever listened to the words of some of the rap songs? I mean, it's pretty shocking. And you hear them, you can go down tonight. I can see it now, down Okmulgee, and hear those cars shaking with this music coming out of it. You know, those kinds of things. And, you know, it's not going to prevent anybody from getting those materials. They're still going to be sold and they're going to still be heard. But the model should be in our schools. And, you know, when you talk about Head Start, when you talk about early childhood, those stories should reflect our good character. Now, we don't go overboard. The bear in Goldilocks, I don't think, was anything sinister. You know, there will be people that go overboard on this, and administrators just shiver when I say, I think everybody should look at their library books. But I'm talking about a realistic, sensible, moderate approach, not a censorship. Please don't write that I'm for censorship, because I'm not. I am for, though, good thought and responsibility in putting all of your books in the hands of children.
This wasn't Banneker, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I should
Well,
clarify that.
that is, also I will tell you this, and Keith knows this, a lot of people, of course, since I've started this, in fact, when I talked to administrators first about it last summer, and my summer administrators, conference, I was very honored. My speech was published nationally, and a lot of people called me, and I said, you know, I don't want to get on any national agenda to go around the nation talking about this much. I just want to see if we can make an effect in Oklahoma. And so then the next wave of interest I had were from all these publishers that have all this character information. I have a set of books for you. I am not interested in endorsing a program for you. I will give you, as Keith knows, a list of resources that I think are good. But I believe that it has to be done locally. I think there are many good resources published, and certainly, you know, privately published that are good. But I think you've got to decide on that. I don't think that's what the state tell you. And as I said, I'll be happy to provide resources list. One last question? Well, thank you very much. You've been a great audience.
Thank you very much, Sandy, for coming to Okmulgee and speaking to us today. It's really been an honor. And again, I'd like to thank Keith and the Education Committee for a wonderful meeting. And before we adjourn, I'd like to ask all the educators in the audience to stand so we could recognize you. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and we're adjourned.
Nice meeting you.